Hi, thank you, Greg, and thank you everyone for attending today. As Greg just laid out, my kind of background is in geopolitics and information warfare, but it is also something that is very relevant to businesses, and that's what I'm going to lay out in my talk today. So just as a little bit of background, I think it's important to lay the context that there have been exponential changes in the architecture of our information ecosystem over the past 30 years. And I'm talking about the advent of the internet, the smartphone, and social media, which are completely revolutionizing the way that we communicate and perceive the world. All of these changes, of course, have been fundamental to the way that we do business as well. This age of information was meant to be this unmitigated good for humanity. But technology, of course, is an amplifier of human intent. And now we're starting to see not only the good sides of this unbounded technological progress, but some of the dark sides too, to the extent where, and you'll see it around you everywhere if you follow especially politics as keenly as I do, that we are abound with bad information, misinformation, and disinformation. In fact, it seems that the entire age of information has become the age of disinformation. Now, it's very clear from COVID, the upcoming US election, some of the recent kind of political debates in this country or in the UK, how corrosive this is for geopolitics and political debate. But it is my contention that this corroding information ecosystem, which I see as increasingly untrustworthy and increasingly dangerous, is an existential risk to business too. Mis and disinformation is devastating to businesses. And the first kind of obvious use case of mis and disinformation against a business is reputational risk. It's not only politicians or public figures who can be harmed by bad information, but we're increasingly starting to see how leading business executives and indeed entire brands and companies can become the targets of mis and disinformation by a range of actors, including state actors, hackers, competitors, or even lone wolves acting by their own accord. So, for example, if you think about the context of today's climate with COVID ongoing, one instance really springs to mind, and this was a few years ago when a hoax news website published fake news stories that Coca-Cola was recalling Dasani, one of its water bottle brands, because it had been infested with parasites and that hundreds of people had been hospitalized. Now, that was a few years ago, but if a piece of disinformation like that came out today against Coca-Cola, it doesn't take a huge stretch of the imagination to see how devastating that could be to the brand's, to the company's image, and indeed, ultimately, the bottom line. And that really is, I suppose, what I want to impress on you here, that disinformation and bad information against companies really hurts your company's bottom line. One study from the University of Baltimore and the cybersecurity firm CHEQ tried to quantify that cost last year. And the figure they came up with is staggering. They found that the annual global cost of mis and disinformation to companies is $78 billion a year. You'd also be mistaken for thinking that it's only the big brands who are suffering from reputational risks related to bad information. It's also small firms. And in fact, one study last year, again, here in the UK, tried to quantify how it impacted small independent UK businesses, and it found that the figure was £6.1 billion a year to small UK companies. So business is already suffering, just analogous to what we see in the realm of politics, to this kind of crisis of mis and disinformation, which is all existing in this increasingly corrupt information ecosystem. But I'm very interested in how information warfare and disinformation is going to change in the coming years, and how AI is basically going to put it on steroids. And the bad news that I have is that if it seems like our crisis of information is already quite extreme, well, AI is going to make it a lot worse. Because what we are at the cusp of is the synthetic media revolution. And specifically when it is, let me first tell you what is a piece of synthetic media. Synthetic media is a video, an audio, text, any piece of media that is synthetically generated, that is to say, it's created by AI and it's fake. Now, the amazing ability of AI to generate synthetic media has only been around for about 2.5 years. So this technology is really, really nascent, but it is extremely powerful, because what it is going to do is take the kind of special effects that previously used to be in the realm of Hollywood studios that would cost millions of dollars. You would need a team of special effects artists to create a kind of fake piece of video. It's going to democratize that so anybody can create it. The other really interesting thing about synthetic media powered by AI is that thus far, when you look at any other special effects or fake media generated by computers, when it comes to creating humans, the computers have never been able to get it quite right. And a good example of this is the recent film, The Irishman by Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese started that project in 2015. He hired the best special effects artists. He had a multi-million-dollar budget, and he tried to de-age the humans in his films. And if you look at the film, it came out in 2019, last year, the effect isn't quite right. But now, AI, synthetic media, so using free software that is emerging from AI, one YouTuber was basically able to create an effect that is more convincing than what Martin Scorsese did over all those years with all that money and all those experts. So the democratizing effects of AI-powered synthetic media means that anybody, any YouTuber, any teenager will be able to create video content, audio content that previously was not possible. It was only reserved for those in the highest domains with the biggest resources. So obviously that's hugely exciting for content creation, and there'll be many practical and really commercially viable applications for a whole lot of industries. But it is also going to become the most sophisticated weapon of mis and disinformation, because you're literally going to be able to make fake films from scratch, and anybody will be able to do it, that the world has ever seen. And given that we're already in this crisis of mis and disinformation, this is going to make it a whole lot worse. Some experts who I spoke to think that in about 5 to 7 years' time, up to 90% of video content online could be synthetic. And the quality of this video and audio and imagery that's generated by AI is going to be so good that we as humans are not going to be able to distinguish whether it's real or whether it's fake. So what you're really looking at is a corrosion of the concept of what is organic and synthetic content. Now, the first use case of a deepfake, because and I should add that when synthetic media is used in a pernicious way as mis or disinformation, I call it a deepfake. And the dangers of deepfakes, since they started emerging 2.5 years ago, can already be seen in the first use case, because the first use case of a deepfake is in a very gendered phenomenon, but a very malicious phenomenon, and that of non-consensual pornography against primarily, well, almost 100% against women. So since this emerged 2.5 years ago, it emerged on Reddit. Now there's an entire deepfake porn ecosystem online that targets every celebrity imaginable. They're all women from all around the world. But it's not only celebrities, because this technology is becoming increasingly commodified into apps. There's an online marketplace where you can pay to have your own bespoke deepfakes created. So it's increasingly targeted against women who are just normal women, so they're not celebrities really. I want to give you an example of just how good this technology is becoming. And again, there's been a lot of attention paid at what the ramifications of this technology is beyond pornography, what it means for politics. So let's just have a look at this clip, which is a deepfake clip.
America, you blame me for interfering with your democracy, but I don't have to. You are doing it to yourselves. Polling stations are closing. You don't know who to trust. You are divided. There are strings we can pull, but we don't have to. You are pulling them for us.
Now, that video was made by a campaign group in the US to urge people to vote in the upcoming US election. And that, of course, is a synthetic Putin. That isn't real Putin speaking in the video at all. But if you didn't know about deepfake technology and you saw something like that on social media, would you think that that's real or that's not real? And obviously, that was made in a way that it's quite obvious that that content is meant to pass a political message. So there's been a lot of attention on what deepfakes mean for politics, but a lot less attention paid on what it means for business. And my contention is that deepfakes, in fact, pose an unprecedented risk for every business that every organization needs to understand. Because the first part is that AI can now literally be trained to hijack your biometrics. So if you are a business leader and I want to create a malicious deepfake video or audio clip of you, I can do that by scouring the internet, getting training data, so some images of you, maybe an audio recording of your voice, and use that to create AI-generated synthetic content. So I can literally hijack your voice, your image, to make you say and do things that you never said or did. So this is a particularly huge threat to C-suite executives or brand ambassadors. And already, again, I mentioned that this technology has been around for about 2.5 years. In the time I've been researching it, we've already seen how on the dark web and on these online marketplaces where you can get your own bespoke deepfake porn creations made, there have been requests of deepfake creators to make them of female business executives. But of course, this will quickly evolve beyond porn. It's a gendered phenomenon now, but the premise that AI can be used to hijack your biometrics will apply widely. So volatile business leaders, for example, Elon Musk, somebody who contributed to the share price of his stock falling by 6% when he went on the Joe Rogan podcast and smoked marijuana, he would be somebody who would be a prime target for a deepfake. Imagine a deepfake comes out of him in some kind of leaked recording where he admits that his share price is too high. Well, you can imagine very quickly what that might unleash on the stock market. But it's not only celebrity influencers, women, and people like Elon Musk who are in the firing line for a pernicious use of deepfake, because as I mentioned, the AI can be trained on anyone's likeness. Anybody can become a target. So that includes everybody in this audience today, you, me, anybody at this conference. And we've seen already how that might play out in a business scenario, because last year we saw our first instance of a deepfake audio fraud. It was a senior business executive here in the UK at an energy company. He was called by his German boss, who told him over the phone to make a transfer of 250,000 euros to a Hungarian energy supplier. The executive questioned his boss. He believed he was talking to his boss because his cadence was perfect, the German accent was perfect. He said it was a strange request, but his boss insisted. So the man transferred the money, and very quickly it transpired that it hadn't been talking to his boss at all, but that he had been talking to a scammer who had been using AI to hijack his boss's voice and thus managed to pull off this really sophisticated AI deepfake audio fraud. Now, that might seem like something out of Mission Impossible for now, but that is increasingly going to become the norm. And in fact, the research agency Forrester predicts that 2020 is the year we're going to start seeing the first kind of big charismatic use cases of deepfakes against businesses, and it estimates that the losses in this year alone will be $250 million. So really, I think we need to, excuse me. So as more charismatic use cases start to emerge, it is clear that mitigating against deepfakes and disinformation has to become a central component of every business's corporate strategy. This is not something that just sits with the IT guy. This is an existential threat potentially to your business. So for a start, in order to prepare, every business must interrogate your internal security protocol, educate your employees on the threat, raise awareness of some telltale signs, but also emphasize that this technology is evolving so rapidly so that if something even feels slightly off, if it's your boss calling you, telling you to send you the money, if it feels slightly off, don't comply. Second is to explore technological solutions. There are various companies already out there that are offering the technology to detect deep fakes. There are APIs that can be incorporated into your existing communications infrastructure to provide early warnings. The third is obviously to explore monitoring or social listening services. Keep an ear to the infosphere around your company. Given the speed that a deepfake or disinformation could impact your company, seconds really count. So make sure that you are aware of the potential narratives that could be weaponized against you or your company. And finally, make sure that you have a crisis response prepared. Have a concrete action plan. Make sure that you know who your strategic media comms partners are, have a company statement ready, and think about legal action, who are the cybersecurity and deepfake detection companies that you're working with. And now I know I've massively overrun my time, but thank you, and I'll end it here.